Are you ready for me to get under your skin, as Mike alluded to earlier?
Absolutely.
So we noticed backstage that one of the panelists from the previous panel was wearing a Fitbit. It sort of slipped out as he was speaking. Do your spidey senses still tingle every time you see one of those in public?
I don't know about spidey sense, but definitely get excited every time. That never ends. So.
After 10, 11 years, it's still exciting to see them out there?
10 years, since we launched. So.
Especially when you get outside the Bay Area and you see them globally, that's just really cool.
Yeah. It's like seeing a Tesla. Like you don't really see them outside of the Bay Area. It's like seeing a Sasquatch when you see them in the rest of the country. So as Mike alluded to before we came on stage, this is it's an interesting cycle to have both of you back on here. So in 2008 at TC50, you showed off the first Fitbit device, a pedometer. So I want to actually start by using this as an opportunity to kind of reflect a little bit on the past decade and ask each of you individually, what's one thing you would have done differently?
So what would I have done differently? I think actually taking a little more time to reflect along the journey. I think I've always been so focused on that next challenge, the next hill to climb, that I have not taken very much time to kind of look back, which, I think that's important for us as individuals, but also for kind of the larger company and kind of making sure the company goes and celebrates the achievement as opposed to focusing on the next challenge.
Is there an instance you can point to where you felt like you rushed a little too quickly into the next generation or the next product?
I don't know if it's necessarily rushing into the next product because the industry moves quickly, so you have to move quickly. But it's also celebrating the moment and saying, look, we've got to focus on the next hill to climb, but let's focus on, let's say, congratulate ourselves and then move on.
James?
Yeah, for me, probably a couple things. So first, we didn't raise enough capital, I'd say, so it's pretty dicey, pretty much most of the early life of the company. I think if I look back, as a private company, we raised about 60 million in capital. 40 million of it came in our final round, which was shortly before the IPO. So we really powered the company to about 1.4 billion in revenue with about $20 million in capital raised. And we were on the knife's edge many, many times during that time period. So it was really stressful, uncomfortable. That was just the reality of the situation. So more capital would have clearly helped at least me sleep better at night, most nights. And the second thing, kind of similar to what Eric said, is time to reflect. I think we're just so busy in the moment. We didn't really celebrate key milestones, et cetera. We were always worried about the next thing. And I remember a classic question we'd ask constantly is, well, how do you think we're doing? We're like, I don't know, we'll know in 6 months. And that kept going for years.
The math changes pretty significantly when you do go public. I mean, I don't anticipate you were necessarily expecting to be in the financial business when you got into the Fitbit business.
No, I mean, when we thought about starting Fitbit, it was really, for both of us, very personally driven. After years of startups, I was out of shape. And, at the time, Nintendo had just announced the Wii, and I was also still had time to play a lot of video games. And, we both thought, wow, Nintendo had made, sensors and software and made gaming into something that was really active and positive. And how do we capture that magic and put it into a more portable form and help ourselves? And, at the time, all this advanced fitness technology was really the realm of athletes, using Garmin products, et cetera. And we really wanted to make it accessible to a lot more people. So that was really the genesis. And it was something that was very personal, something that was really mission driven. And, while, we thought about the finances, et cetera, that wasn't really something that was super top of mind at the time.
But I actually still think that building great product is still the focus. In some ways, with parenting, they say little kids, little problems, big kids, big problems. So yes, the magnitude of some of the financial decisions has grown, but when you're small, you go, well, do I really want to spend that money on that small multimeter or something trivial? Now you're making the same thing, it's just a real estate decision or something else, but you're still having that same kind of struggle, it's just on a different scale, but it's the same types of questions you're wrestling with.
Yeah, it's weird because we're trying to find the cheapest multimeter, voltmeter, and at some point 2 years ago, we bought a electron microscope to look for defects and flaws in products, and those things are incredibly expensive. So obviously the scale of things has changed.
Sure, but the expectations certainly shift when there are investors involved, right? I mean, It changes when you're a small company and you're really sort of excited about this product early on, but when there's a lot of people invested in this company, doesn't the math change pretty significantly?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a lot of responsibility. I think, Eric and I always thought of ourselves as stewards of our investors' capital, and we're always very frugal, very conscious with how we spent money, not just because it was required, because that's all the capital that we have, but I think it was just, how we approach things generally in personal life and in business as well. So, I think that's just, one of our key principles.
So the investor base has grown, but it's the same, still working with investor money.
So let's project out 10 years. What do wearables look like 10 years from now?
So, I think one thing is, first of all, Fitbit, while we make a lot of our money with wearables, and that is obviously something that we're known for, it's really about what we can do with that data and how we make that actionable. And so to me, 10 years from now, it's not just the wearables, and there's probably going to be other things, maybe a combination of implantables and other things on the body, but it's the fact that you can suddenly make that data so much more actionable, and it really knows you and gives you that personal guidance, and that it almost feels, it has that almost embodiment of a friend that's kind of giving you that guidance where you go, oh yeah, I trust it, it knows what's best for me. And that to me is where the future is in 10 years, even beyond just the hardware, it's the data.
Yeah, it's really about the story beyond the device, and as we launched Premium recently, and we're starting to launch more health services, it's really the story about the software and what happens after we get the data for people. And at some point, the software and services that we develop, we're thinking that it's not just for Fitbit devices, it's for whatever you're bringing to the table in terms of a device. So we're thinking well beyond a wearable at this stage.
So a few months ago, you announced the upcoming premium service. Obviously, this is a really big play, and certainly Fitbit's not the only company that is shifting some of the burden into software and services. How important is it that that service succeeds out of the gate as far as the future of the company is concerned?
I think it's important long term that it succeeds, and the first way I look at it is from how do our users benefit from it. I think we've gotten to the point where we know what the value of the hardware is, but there's, again, as Eric mentioned, there's all this untapped potential in the data and the software that drives behavior change on top of it. And so we're very focused on how do we unleash that potential for our users. And then secondly, there's definitely the positive business impact of it as well, where for us it's less thinking about episodic device sales and more thinking about what is the long-term financial relationship and health relationship that we have with our consumers.
So what are investor expectations on that front, or what are your personal expectations on that front as far as how many subscribers you're hoping to accumulate in, say, the first year?
Yeah, we haven't really stated what our expectations are, but I have high expectations, at least from the value that we deliver to our users, and we have 27 million active users. So that's an incredibly big foundation on top of which to launch a really amazing health service.
It's a big base, but I mean that's still a hard ask, right? So you're asking people to buy these devices up front. Obviously that's a sliding scale in terms of price, but then this is like yet another service in everybody's life. This is on top of Netflix and Disney and all these other services that you're asking people to spend another $10 a month. So what's the value proposition there?
I think the value proposition is people are willing to spend a lot of money on their health. It's something that's incredibly important to them. If you think about the money that's spent on just gym memberships, whether it's SoulCycle, your basic gym, nutrition, apparel, even Peloton recently. Again, health is something that's incredibly important, and people are willing to spend a lot of money to be healthy.
And I also think it's something that people can innately measure. Like they will feel better, healthier. And so kind of creating a virtuous cycle where our interests are aligned on making sure we can get our users to their goals. They see themselves moving against those goals. They're willing to pay. And then that kind of gives us the funding to keep investing to get them even further along those goals. So it aligns our interests better with our customers.
So that's obviously it's a little bit abstract, and that's kind of a lofty promise of people are paying for health. Again, there's a certain free app that comes along with it. People are really used to that experience. What's the value proposition on top of what they're already offering? What's something, I guess, a little bit more, I'm searching for something a little more concrete than people value their health.
Yeah, so I think one, when we launched the service, we did a lot of market research of our existing customers, and in terms of your question around willingness to pay, over a majority of our existing user base were already paying for some type of digital health and fitness service. So we knew there was already a high willingness to pay. And if you look at our initial launch of Premium, a couple of things that come to mind is, one of the things that I'm excited about is this idea of guided programs that help you eat better, get more active, sleep better. In fact, right before the launch, I did one of our sleep programs, which was a 2-week program. It's called Get More Z's. And typically my sleep is terrible. I sleep about 5 hours a night.
It's pretty good for a CEO, I think.
Yeah, it's just a lot of work to do. So, I took the program and, it had personalized knowledge of me based on my Fitbit history. So it knew I did 5 hours of sleep, and it wasn't going to set a sleep goal of like 7 hours because that's just unrealistic. So it said, hey, we know how much sleep you're doing. Why don't we set a realistic goal of trying to get you to 5.5 hours? So I said, sure. It gave me nudges at the right bedtime. It gave me programs and content for me to get through. It gave me checklist of items every night. And I actually found it super useful. It was a 2-week program. And at the end, I did end up hitting 5.5 hours. It gave me charts that showed my progress. Like it showed my sleep consistency, like how regularly I go to bed and wake up. And before, it was such a terrible graph because I also saw a comparison with a quote normal person, and I was like, God, that normal person looks so weird because it's like so even how consistently they go to bed. At the end, I saw the graph that showed, hey, I did get better on that front, and it was highly motivational. So it's things like that I think are tremendously powerful just beyond the device. And another thing that we're about to launch shortly as part of Premium that I'm super excited about is what we call our doctor's report, where we're summarizing all the data that's collected, putting it into a very easy to understand format that you can take to your doctor to have a very productive conversation about your health outside of that office visit. So these are some of the key things that I'm really excited about in the Premium service that just isn't available out there.
It does seem like and understandably so, when we talk about all these things, we're really sort of speaking in future tense. So, oftentimes when we talk about a wearable device as being, like a serious health tool, that's something that we're kind of projecting a little bit down the road. Can you say definitively that in 2019, a Fitbit device is a serious health tool?
So we've seen, yes, we are currently, we've talked publicly about our work on apnea and AFib, 2 diseases that impact large numbers of people.
So you're talking about heart rate monitoring.
Heart rate monitoring. Yeah. We see people, we've always gotten emails about how Fitbit has changed people's lives, whether it be through inspiring them to move more, be more active. But we've actually been seeing the tenor of those emails change, where especially with heart rate, of catching those acute incidents and kind of saying, oh my God, if I had not gone to the doctor right now, I would not have been there for my family. And those pull your heartstring. And so yes, Fitbit impacts health, not just in the short term, but also longitudinally as well.
Yeah, and I think the healthcare industry is starting to see it too. We've seen a huge sea change in how the healthcare community sees wearable devices and the data and the software on top. In the early days, someone would always ask me, why don't you work with insurance companies? I'm like, that's a great idea. Why don't we think of that?
That wasn't something that was on the roadmap in the early days?
No, so we always wanted to work with insurance companies, but...
Did you, sorry, just to back up a second, did you not think of it as being a serious health tool in the same way that you do now when you were launching?
We always did, but it was just so early in the stage of the industry. And we had early conversations with healthcare companies, but again, they just weren't there yet. And what's happened over the last 2 to 3 years is really a sea change in how insurance companies are seeing this type of device and the data that they generate. So right now we have partnerships with over 100 health plans, insurance companies, including the nation's largest, United Healthcare, Humana, et cetera. With United Healthcare, actually in 2019, Fitbit devices are a fully covered benefit in 42 Medicare Advantage plans in 27 states. That means if you are a senior on a Medicare Advantage plan, Fitbits are free. That's a huge deal. We were the first wearable to be part of that. And actually, this is an announcement that just making on stage. For 2020, we're expanding that to over, I think, about 59 plans as well. So that's a steady expansion. So this shows that health plans are pretty serious about the benefit of these devices.
Was Fitbit too late, or was Fitbit later than it should have been to smartwatches?
I think you could debate whether are we a year off, on the right time, et cetera. We clearly saw the shift happening.
Yeah.
And if you look at the progress we've made over the past 2 years since the launch of Ionic, we're shipping millions and millions of smartwatches every year at this point. We went literally from 0 to number 2 in smartwatches in the United States in a short period of time. And I think that's an incredible accomplishment for a company of our size.
But did it take the success of the Apple Watch, though, for the company to really see the writing on the wall with that device?
Well, I think it really started with Pebble. And we ended
Sure,
up
now you
acquiring
own Pebble, yeah.
at some point. So if anything, I think Pebble really showed the way. I think there is some unfilled potential and promise there. But as Eric mentioned, given all the stories that we're seeing about the incredible benefit that these devices can have, whether it's a smartwatch or tracker, I actually think the distinction's kind of irrelevant. Look, there's so much work to be done in the future.
And I also think it's really important to have the right form factor for the right user. We start off very specifically to try and change how people view pedometers. It became a fashion thing, it kind of fitting with your wardrobe. Having someone, you mentioned someone on stage earlier, he was wearing a tracker. It's small, blended in with kind of a more fashionable thing. Some people want more of a watch form factor. So I think it's really important to have something that fits with the user, because if they don't wear it, you don't get the data, and therefore you can't drive that behavior change, which was where we're focused.
Are you exploring a sale for the company?
What I can say is, look, my day is pretty much the same since the start of the company. I wake up incredibly focused on the mission. I also work out, I walk to work, incredibly focused on the mission, and that's what drives me every day. And, for rumors and news, that's pretty much par for the course for companies that are doing something interesting. So, that's what I'm going to say about it.
Obviously, though, there were some very specific rumors that came out from Reuters a few weeks back. Do you think that Fitbit could operate the same way? Do you think it would make sense in the context of a larger company, or can it only kind of exist the way it exists now?
Look, what we're doing is incredibly important. It's going to have such a profound impact on people's lives. And so I think that's exciting for anybody looking at the space.
Okay, so you wouldn't necessarily say no to the possibility of a sale going forward?
I'm saying they're just rumors.
Okay.
That's all they are.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.